All right, we are going to be in Acts 25. We're going to read the first 22 verses. If you'd like to stand for the reading of God's Word, that would be great. Acts 25, verse 1. Now 3 days after Festus had arrived, just to give us where we're at, Felix has now kept Paul in prison for 2 years. And now he's being replaced by Festus. Right? That's where we're at. Now, 3 days after Festus had arrived in the province, he went up to Jerusalem from Caesarea. And the chief priests and the principal men of the Jews laid out their case against Paul. They urged him, asking him a favor against Paul, that he summon him to Jerusalem, because they were planning on ambushing to kill him on the way. Festus replied that Paul was being kept in Caesarea and that he himself intended to go there shortly. So he said, "Let the men of authority among you go down with me, and if there's anything wrong about the man, let him bring charges against him." After he stayed among them not more than 8 or 10 days, he went down to Caesarea. The next day he took a seat on the tribunal, and he ordered Paul to be brought. And when he had arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him, bringing many serious charges against him that they could not prove. Paul argued in his defense, "Neither against the law of the Jews, nor the temple, nor against Caesar have I committed any offense. But Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, said to Paul, 'Do you wish to go up to Jerusalem to be tried on these charges before me?' But Paul said, 'I am standing before Caesar's tribunal, where I ought to be tried. To the Jews I have done no wrong, as you yourself know very well. If I am a wrongdoer and have committed anything for which I deserve to die, I do not seek to escape death. But if there is nothing to their charges against me, no one can give me up to them. I appeal to Caesar.' Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, 'To Caesar you have appealed, to Caesar you shall go.' Now when some days had passed, Agrippa, the king, and Bernice arrived in Caesarea and greeted Festus, and they stayed there many days. Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, 'There's a man left prisoner by Felix. And when I was in Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders and the Jews laid out their case against him, asking for a sentence of condemnation against him. I answered them that it was not a custom of Romans to give up anyone before the accused met the accusers face to face and had the opportunity to make his defense concerning the charge laid against him. So when they came together here, I made no delay, but on the next day took my seat at the tribunal and ordered the men to be brought. And when the accusers stood up, they brought no charge in this case of such evils as I supposed. Rather, they had certain points about dispute about their own religion and about a certain Jesus who was dead, but who Paul asserted was alive. Being at a loss on how to investigate these questions, I asked whether he wanted to go to Jerusalem to be tried there regarding them. But when Paul had appealed to be kept in custody for the decision of the emperor, I ordered him to be held until I could send him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, 'I would like to hear the man myself.' 'Tomorrow,' he said, 'you shall hear him.' So on the next day, Agrippa and Bernice came with great pomp and circumstance. They entered the audience hall with military tribunes and prominent men of the city, and then at the command of Festus, Paul was brought in." God bless the reading of his word. All right, so here we got Paul again, being Paul. And now after 2 years, you can see in the first note, ... Guess what the Jews still want to do? They still want to kill him. Man, these people are determined. They have a plan of ambush again. 2 years of custody. Putting Paul in jail is not enough. Now, I can kind of understand this. Because at this point, most theologians believe that Paul's only written 6 letters. So that means how many more he has to write? Some Bible trivia. That's all right if you don't know. I look like the smartest guy in the world because I know Bible trivia. It's not really Bible trivia. Is the Bible really trivial? No. How many more? Somebody said it. It's 7 more. He wrote 13 letters. So he still has 7 more to write. We know 4 of them were written in custody, in jail. Now, whether there is some theological argument, I don't really care. It could have been in Caesarea. It could have been in Rome. Some people argue, maybe a little here, maybe a little there. But we do know that 4 of them were while he was in prison. They actually mentioned being in prison, in chains. So, in other words, Paul, even in custody, is still going to do mighty works for God. In fact, most of us probably, I didn't wear a belt, so if I'm adjusting my pants a lot, I apologize. Let's just stay on. Yeah, that's a way to get your credentials taken away right there. What happened? He was just going along and his pants fell down. Okay, that's dumb. All right. Most of us know Paul not for his missionary service. Most of us know Paul for what? Yeah, it's what he wrote in the Bible. And so, believe it or not, yes, we saw in his missionary that he literally changed cities and towns. Probably generations. Could you imagine being one of those people who can actually, and I know that there are people that do this, can trace their lives back to being in having their family be a church in Ephesus or a church in Antioch or a church that was converted to Christianity through the teaching of Apostle Paul. I know there are people that can do this. That would be awesome. But that is not most of us. Most of us know Paul because we read his letters. Most of us are very challenged by his letters. Most of us have grown very close to Jesus Christ because of his letters. Some of the most famous people for Christ these letters have transformed their life. One of the major church fathers of our little idea of church, John Wesley, who started the big Methodist revival and had all this. Well, we're kind of related in some way to them down the road. It was a teaching on Romans in which he felt completely, utterly a pauper for God, that he was at a loss and that God was everything after going to a small group teaching on Romans. So a lot of people can trace their lives back to that. And so I guess for good reason, the Jews still want Paul dead. Because not even custody, not even jail can stop Paul from proclaiming Jesus Christ. And we already know that when Drusilla and Felix came down, he would, no matter their motives of trying to get rich, guess what he would talk to them about? About Jesus. Now we're going to see, oh man, are we going to see some stuff. So, when it gets to verses 10 and 12, where it says, hey, would you like to go down to Jerusalem to be tried by them? It's very interesting that in all of the times that Paul actually has caused a ruckus in a different town, now granted, it was still just teaching about Jesus. It's not like he broke a law. But I mean, in Ephesus, he did change people's lives and change their livelihood. Like a person who made idols to Artemis could not sell idols to Artemis anymore because nobody wanted the idols, they all wanted Jesus. This person's livelihood was attacked. That at least makes some sense on why you would be mad at a person. But in this case, we know that Paul went through a purification and was found in the temple just praying and doing exactly what a good Jew would do. And they still just brought false charges against him. So in this case, there was really nothing going on. They could have just let Paul be there. Now, of course, we know what he would have finally eventually done when he left the temple. He would have been preaching what? Throughout Jerusalem. He would have been preaching Jesus in Jerusalem. There's no doubt about that. But at this time, there was no charge against him. Zero. He actually was innocent due to both Jewish and Roman law. 100% innocent. And so, we know this. What did Jesus tell Paul just a few weeks ago in Acts? What did Jesus tell Paul? If you have a red letter Bible, it's red letters. What did Jesus tell Paul? It's at the end of 23, or middle of 23. Yeah. So if you don't remember, that's good, I'm reminding you. Jesus has told Paul, take courage. You spoke boldly about Jesus, about me in Jerusalem. You're going to speak boldly about me in Rome. You're going to Rome. And Paul believes Jesus. Who here believes Jesus? That's good. So, was it really a question for Paul when he was asked by Festus, hey, do you want to go to Jerusalem? For Paul? No. Where does Paul want to go? He's going to be obedient to Jesus. I'm going to Rome. So no, I don't want to go back to Jerusalem. All right, so it really is no choice for Paul. All right. Here, we'll get to that one later. On the back of your paper, we're going to spend a little bit of time here. This is partially the family tree of Herod the Great. And man, you think you got a messed up family. And you might have a messed up family. But I don't think you got a messed up family like this family. All right? So first of all, Herod, as you can see, had at least, we got these 5 wives that we got here. All right? And we're also, again, you got to remember, this is a time in a culture where having multiple wives, it's not that uncommon, especially for quote-unquote royalty, to take some extra wives. But it is a lot less common in the first century where you're supposed to, more things were more, let's just put it this way, it was more monogamous. Especially in Jewish households, monogamy was the norm. And we're going to find out that Herod actually, so if you want to put a little note down there, Antipater, his father, was a converted Jew. He converted to Judaism. He married an Arab Jew, and he converted to Judaism. So Herod the Great was actually born, guess what? He was born Jewish. All right? So King Herod, now Herod the Great, and if you want to put the great travesty or the great sinner or the great whatever, you can put great whatever because he really wasn't that great. This Herod the Great is the one who we learned a little bit about, who died roughly about 4 AD. AD. And he's the one who, after hearing about the wise men's visit, had the massacre in Bethlehem and the surrounding area, killing all the babies 2 years, male babies 2 years old and younger. That's Herod the Great. And so Jesus and this family, Jesus and the church, are going to have interactions with King Herod and his offspring. All right? And we know a lot, actually. There's much more than I'm going to say. We know a lot. And has gotten great favor with the Jews. Here's one of the reasons. If you look at Herod's wife number 2, Miriam, she is of the royal Jewish family descended from the Maccabees. The Maccabees were one of the major rulers of the Jews just before Christ was born. They are the ones that held up what's called the Maccabean Revolt when the temple was desecrated by the Romans. And the Maccabees are the ones that held up the Jewish faith and kind of took back the temple. And so not only does King Herod have the favor of Rome, but he married into Jewish royalty. Kind of like he's got kind of royalty and favor from both sides. And if you see down this chain, I wanted this picture up, but I had forgotten this morning. This morning was a little bit weird. Me coming straight in from out of town. But if you go down that line, you're going to get down here. Agrippa II is the Agrippa that we're going to talk about today and next week. And if you look right beside Agrippa's sister Bernice. Let's just say their relationship was inappropriate. Okay? If we go down towards the other side, Herod Antipas is the Herod in which Jesus stood in front of in Luke 23. He is also the Herod that took his brothers. You see Philip there? These are all the offspring of Herod the Great. Philip here. Philip was married to his niece, Herodias. Yeah, kind of crazy. But Herodias was then taken by Herod Antipas. He married his brother's wife, who was also his niece. I see a few faces with the right look. So, you can see this is kind of a tangled web of incest and ickiness. And so this is what John the Baptist stood up against. And this is the Herod and Herodias who asks for John the Baptist's head on a platter. And gets it. Whether he wanted to finally do that or not. The pressure was on. John the Baptist ordered his death. So you can see in here that the church, Jesus, and the Herods do what? They interact all the time. In fact, almost into the generations, you can see Herod Agrippa I. He died in the mid-40s AD. He was the one who killed James, the apostle, by the sword in Jerusalem. So, not James, the brother of Jesus, who would later become the leader of the Jerusalem church, but James the apostle, the brother of John. Not John the Baptist, but John the apostle. Got it? This is a crazy, tangled mess. This Agrippa and Bernice are in an inappropriate relationship at this point. Bernice and Drusilla. Notice, hey, look at Drusilla. Drusilla is Bernice's sister, who's Agrippa's brother. They're all related. But Drusilla was Felix's wife, who we talked about last week. And so this person, Paul, if you're going to ask yourself the question, why does Herod Agrippa want to actually hear, and Bernice want to hear about Jesus? Well, my guess is they've already heard about Jesus through who? Drusilla and Felix. Why? Because they're related too. Everyone seems to be related. Are we getting kind of how messed up all of this really is? And that here it is, probably one of the most influential, powerful families in Jerusalem has the favor of Rome as well, living in outright sin. And Paul stands in front of them and preaches what? We're going to hear next week. He preaches Jesus. This gospel is for everyone. Is it for royalty? Yes. Is it for the saint? Yes. Is it for the sinner? Yes. This gospel is for everyone, and Paul, knowing this, is going to be positioned for his next audience. Do not separate yourself from the Scriptures. God's doing the same thing in your life. He's getting you prepared for the next time you get to share about what Jesus has done for you, more importantly, what Jesus can do for them. That's what He's doing with your life. He's positioning you for this purpose. So that's exactly what's happening here. So as you can see, look, I didn't barely even touch. In my research of the family of Herod, I pretty much had to take a shower afterwards. Right? It's really bad. They're evil people. They're not only just social and political deviants, they're definitely sexual deviants. And it is a really messed up family. Guess what they still deserve to hear about? They still deserve to hear about Jesus and the opportunity to become a Christian. We'll see this in great detail. Remember this. I'll give you a few more maybe tidbits next week about the messed up family that is just riddled with this incest and murder and political backstabbing. If we look at verse 19, we get to have not just the theme of what we do on Sunday, we have the theme of what this is all about anyway. So, what is Festus' conclusion in verse 19? Someone want to read it for me? Anybody can read it out. Verse 19. This is Festus' conclusion about what's going on really here. Go ahead, Jordan. Yeah, so here's what Festus heard when he went. Remember, he stayed down there for like 8 days or 10 days, according to 8 or no more than 10, according to Luke. All the little things, the little tidbits that Luke puts in, he can't get the right day there. Come on. But the point is he stayed there for like a week and heard their complaints about Paul, and he finally comes back and says, here's what it's really all about. There were some religious things that they were talking about, which again, remember, Paul didn't do anything wrong. He actually did everything right. But there's also this Jesus, who the Jews say is dead, but Paul say is what? Alive. And this is what Paul's been saying the whole time. You're holding me because of the resurrection. You're holding me back because of the resurrection, and specifically the resurrection of the dead and the resurrection of one particular person, Jesus Christ. And so, believe it or not, Festus is getting this. Like he's hearing it enough that he knows what this is really all about. And again, we've talked about this week in and week out. Week in and week out. It's like, Pastor, do you even have a different sermon? No, it's all about Jesus. And so we're seeing it again. So Festus comes to this conclusion. Look, it's really, there's nothing here, and he even says it, that deserves condemnation. They want him dead, but I find nothing. They keep talking about some of their Jewish religious laws and then this Jesus guy. And so we find out that this is what Agrippa and Bernice want to hear. So there's no real trial. You can see here in your next note, there's no real trial facing Paul in Jerusalem. We know what's heading for him if he goes to Jerusalem. What is heading for him if he goes to Jerusalem? Yeah, they're trying to ambush and kill him. Let's say he doesn't get ambushed and killed. Can anybody predict what will happen to Paul in Jerusalem? And let's say the ambush doesn't work because the ambush didn't work the first time. Let's say they get him to Jerusalem and they get him in front of the Jews. What will it be? Because we've already seen an example of this. What will it be? Yeah, a mock trial. We know this is going to happen. This is how Jesus got persecuted to the point of death. It's a mock trial. That's all they can do. So there is no real trial facing him in Jerusalem. And of course, this is why Paul's going to appeal to Caesar. First of all, we've already come to the fact that Paul's going to appeal to Caesar because he knows he's going to where? He's going to Rome. But we know what is there for him in Jerusalem. Remember when he left the believers in Ephesus? They said it was chains and what would find him in Jerusalem? And death. He knows what awaits him there, but he also knows he's going there. And so we know this. And so I always like to bring the scriptures into the reality of your life. And now I can bring it into this whole idea of what, Sabbath and disobedience to God and stuff like that. Like, disobedience to God ends up in what? Death. It ends up in bad things happening to your life. Can we agree to that? I don't care if you believe in God. I don't. I mean, I do, but I don't for this argument. We know that if we follow just Judeo-Christian values, the good book, the Ten Commandments, the obedience to Christ, we know that those things end up living, you can live a very good life. Like it can just be a good life. You're not stealing from other people. You're an honest person. Your word is your word. Your yes is yes. Your no is no. You don't go around killing or coveting other people's goods and taking their wives and things like that. You're like a good person. Now, when you start breaking these rules, these regulations, these commands, what happens to your life? Yeah, it does. About the commands in the Bible about drunkenness. Will drunkenness lead you to good things? No, it usually leads you to bad things. And you could be the funnest drunk in the world. Bad things. How about stealing? Does stealing lead to good things? No. Let's do some obvious ones. How about your neighbor's wife? Taking your neighbor's wife. How does that lead? Good things? No. All right. So I think we all come to the conclusion that obedience to these, whether we believe in this God or not, can actually lead to good things in your life. You can actually live a good life. Whereas disobedience in these things, and they aren't simple things. Now, I didn't say they were hard, not hard, because it's hard sometimes in our culture to not be covetous of our neighbor's goods and things. Especially when we have a culture that says, wow, your life is not as good as their life. Buy this product and you'll get a step in the right direction. Right? Always being tried to sell something. Again, I didn't say it wasn't hard at times. Sometimes it's not always easy to tell the truth, especially when sometimes the truth might do what to another person? It might hurt them. And sometimes, though, it's easier to, I don't know, just a little white lie for their protection. So again, I'm not saying obedience is always easy. The Bible's pretty clear, and the old hymn tells you what comes before obedience. What's the old hymn say? There's no other way but to and obey. Yeah. So the question then comes, do we actually trust him? Now we get to a place where, wow, I might actually have to believe in him. Obedience might not be enough if it's actually we have to trust him. Because if we trust to obey, then believe it or not, that friendship that you could jeopardize by the truth, you need to trust God in that friendship. I've had Plenty of times where I had to tell people the truth. Plenty of times. That was actually pretty hurtful. And might not have been right off the bat, but in many cases, those friendships actually grew in the end. Some cases it wasn't. I have to hand them over to God. But I trust God with their lives. I really do. But I know it's my job, as gently as possible, it does say the truth with love, as gently as possible try to introduce Jesus and the truth, because He is the truth, into their life. And so we know there's no real trial facing Paul in Jerusalem. And this brings us to where we ended in. And it's going to be, I think, you don't have this week's devotion. Let's say you don't really do the weekly devotions. That's fine. But I want to challenge you to take one on your way out. Because I think this is going to be an important one. Because here's what we see. I'm just going to read it to you. On the next day, Agrippa and Bernice came with great pomp. And they entered the audience hall with military tribunes and the prominent men of the city. And then at the command of Festus and Paul, Paul was brought in. Wow. You see the little note. Note the pomp and the circumstance involved. This truly does reveal our fallen nature. Because I've already kind of set it up for you. This Herod family, they're a pretty messed up group. And yet, look what the culture does for them. Like, do you think it's a secret to the people that Agrippa and Bernice are brother and sister? No, it is not. In fact, we know all of this sordid stuff, not from the Bible. The Bible does mention some of this stuff, but very little. The main charges against, when John the Baptist charges against Herod's wife, taking Philip's wife, who was his niece, and say, you should not do that. So, well, that was pretty loud. And so, that's not a secret, but what is the world doing? Yeah, not only accepting it, what are they doing? Yeah, they're cheering it on. The prominent men of the city are out there. Woo-hoo! Way to go with this incest. That is awesome. You're the best, Herod. They're celebrating sin. Okay, how about we take a little step back and look at our culture? What is going on today with all sorts of sin? Like, I'm not, like, you can name it. I'm not picking on any one sin. I'm picking on a lot of sins here. Sin is celebrated. Is it celebrated to be materialistic in our culture? You better believe it. Is it celebrated to have party spirit in our culture? Yeah. Is it celebrated to worry about how you look on the outside in our culture? Is it celebrated to be a sexual deviant in our culture? Is it celebrated? Can we just keep going down the list? Are these things celebrated? And the answer is yes. And we see it. We see this actually happening right here. And so I want to take, like, literally a couple minutes. You guys, you guys have done very good to make this church feel like it's full. Like, we're just, like, spread out all over. There's people in, like, all corners. That's awesome. And now it's the day I'm trying to get you down. Let's get together a little bit. Go ahead and just get together and get in like 2 and 3 or 4. And I want you to actually think about this with small discussion. You don't have to get personal if you don't want. In fact, if you want to get personal in this. But in your discussion with each other, I want you to then go through these things. And you can write these in. Looking to the world, where do you/we, because again, we don't want to get too personal. And then God might change us. Where do you/we look to the world for your importance? Or if you want to change that word, value. Okay? Now let's just be honest when we get into groups. And then where do we look to the world for approval? And don't think these are the same thing, because if you want to change that word, that's like favor. Who do you want to have favor from in the world? Who do you want to give you that nice little pat on the back? All right? Good, Andrew's here. He'll be a good group member. And then the third one I want you to, again, and I'm only going to give you like 3 to 5 minutes. So, again, but we're going to look at this all throughout. Look, where do you look for the world for that acceptance? That you're okay, that you actually belong to somebody or something. Where do you look for these things? All right? So let's go. Get together. You're allowed to get together, and we're going to have a little powwow. And somebody catch Andrew up with the first two. Come on, your times are running out. Yeah, Melissa, you go back here with Jordan and Byron. Or Andrew, you're going there? Good. All right. How are we doing? I'm sure we're going pretty good in this discussion. So, how about this? If you want to share, I'm not going to force anyone to share, but how about the first one here? Where are we finding our value or our, what I put there, importance from the world now? Did anybody share something that was, profound or honest or something like that? All right, so yeah, we got a good one there. Jobs, status, title. We got some students in the room. Hey, man, when that grade comes in, there's a couple that are like, ugh. There's others that are like, yeah, that's when I feel good. That does make you feel important, doesn't it? It does make you feel valuable when your boss comes up to you and says, hey, good job. Hey, you're getting a raise. I'm going to change your title. These are all good things, not bad things. Didn't say these were bad. How about the favor or approval? How about this one? Did anybody say something in your group that really jumped off the page? Well, you were talking. Were you talking about this? I said you don't have to share. Were you about to say something? Your mouth went like this. Oh, it was a cough. Oh, I like that one. That one is huge. Family approval. Man, oh man. Isn't it nice to hear approval from a parent? Isn't it nice to have a pat on the back? It is. No doubt about it. And how about the you're okay, you're mine, that kind of acceptance? Where do we look kind of a role for that one? And your groups jump off the page there. It's true. No doubt about it. I am probably one of the worst people to talk to. I do watch the occasional movie. Especially when it comes to TV shows, I'm pretty bad. Can't carry a conversation like with my wife. I'm like, watch this? No. Have you? No. Not the good water cooler person when it comes to TV. Now, other type of entertainment, probably. But yeah. About people with isn't it good to be part of a fan group? Like, your NFL team wins and you find out someone else cheers for that NFL team and you're like, automatically, you're like brothers. True. Oh, you like them too? As a Denver Bronco fan in Virginia, when I find another Denver Bronco fan, I hug them. Doesn't happen very often. So, yeah. This week it's going to be a lot of thinking about some of these things in the Devo. We already know the answer to this. We know the answer. The answer to this is you should find your value in Jesus Christ. You should find virtually all your meaning, your acceptance, your favor. This is, we should be seeking Him and Him alone. And I can tell you this on the authority of Scripture and on experience. Not that I'm perfect at this experience, but I can tell you this on the authority of Scripture and my own experience. When I put Jesus as the person I'm looking for value, favor, and acceptance from, it makes all the other things not just pale in comparison, but it makes them so much richer. How fair is it for Shannon, for me to have my value, acceptance, and meaning come from her and that relationship? She's an awesome wife. She's a terrible God. Or how about with our kids? Give us look for our meaning and value and favor and acceptance through seeing their successes and things like that. What kind of pressure is that we put on them? How much more meaningful do you believe your relationships can be when you actually place all of this onto the person in which it actually was meant to be? And then you can actually be husband to your wife, father to your kids. Don't put pressure on them to be your God. They can actually be who they're supposed to be, not only for themselves individually, but for you, the body of Christ. How about for this situation? As you are church and I am pastor. Man, you think it's nice to hear, oh, you did great today, pastor. Well done. Look at your church. Look how things are changed and all that. That's pretty good to have, isn't it? But I can tell you this right now, and I know this. If I'm up here for any other reason than Jesus Christ, I'm failing you guys. Failing you guys. Because I love you, I don't give a rip what you say to me after a sermon. It is because of that, and I don't really care. You liked it? Great. If you didn't, great. I can tell you right now, and I mean this with all my heart, I study His Word because I want to get to know Him better. Every message I do is a message for me to grow closer to Him. It is not a message for you. I pray that the Holy Spirit works through His Word, and I know that He will. I love Jesus. I want Him to grow me. He is who I want favor from. He is who I want value from. He is who I want acceptance from. This song is going to play, and I want you to either sing it because you know it or read it as it goes along. The very end, we're going to take this communion together. We're going to take this communion together. And then, citizens of heaven, go in peace and love to serve the Lord. You will be dismissed.